Hey everyone, welcome to Stripe for the public beta announcement of Workbench. Super excited to chat today. We have two members of the community here. We have Nate from Notion, we have Burr from Slack, and last but not least, we have our PM for Workbench, MG. Wanted to give the folks today a chance to introduce themselves. Before they do, I'm Corey, your host for today, moderating the event. I'm a developer advocate here at Stripe, and I'll pass it to you, Nate, to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nate. I'm a monetization engineer at Notion. I spend a lot of my time working on our Stripe integration, building new features, debugging existing issues, making sure that the money flow at Notion is working and we have visibility and customers can pay us.
Hi, my name is Burr. I'm a payments and billing engineer at Slack. I've been there for 3.5 years. I was hired for that, exactly, billing. And what we do at Slack, essentially, we handle the self-serve side of the business, which is essentially making sure that, all the operations on the self-serve side make sense and work. Everything financial related, everything engineering, like the engineering portion of the financials essentially works. All the integrations around making sure a customer can pay, making sure they can be paid out, like our portion of the business allows for payouts as well. Revenue recognition, dining, subscriptions, and so on.
Cool. And MG, I'm a product lead at Stripe working on our API platform and developer products. I've been at Stripe thinking about developer experience for the last 7+ years, and I'm super excited to be able to talk through what we built to enable developers today with Workbench. And yeah, thanks, Corey, for moderating the session. You want to kick it off?
Yeah, definitely. Well, today we're going to be chatting through a variety of different things. We're going to go look at Workbench. We're going to get a demo from MG. We're going to be able to chat about it and see different reactions, experience using the product, and as well thoughts and feedback. We're always excited for feedback here at Stripe, and talking with developers, that's honestly probably one of the best ways to learn about how your product is working and what people like about it. And then as well, we'd love to close out and kind of just talk about developer experience as a whole. So without further ado, MG, would you love to give an overview of Workbench for the audience, folks who may be aware, but if not, would love to give some information about what we're launching today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Workbench is a new developer tool we've built based upon working with folks like Nate and Burr over the last few years. A lot of research that we did around using Stripe. Workbench is essentially this panel that provides you the ability to turn the API from a black box into a pane of glass. So typically when using an API system, part of the limitation is that it's not on your machine, right? It's not on your laptop. And so what you were able to do is send requests, receive responses, and examine what those requests and responses are. And whatever's happening inside of the API, sometimes it's not clear. It's a bit of a black box. And we noticed that developers were frequently flipping between a bunch of different resources and tools, jumping around in the dashboard. For example, they would create an object in the dashboard, and then they would open the Chrome dev tools, and they'd start to inspect the network requests, which, as developers always find a way to understand what's going on, and, figure out how that object is changing to then figure out what requests to make themselves. And so we want to take that whole flow and just build the tool to enable turning that black box into a pane of glass and see everything that's happening on the inside. So I'm going to take a quick look with you all right now at what Workbench is capable of, show you how to activate it, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how teams like Slack and Notion have been using Workbench over the last few months in private beta, and we're really excited to be able to share with the world today. So,
the easiest way to get started with Workbench is to go to dashboard.stripe.com/workbench, and we can see a walkthrough of the features of the new tool. I'm going to go ahead and click the Join the Beta button. We can see this really useful pane pop up at the bottom of your browser, which provides a new collection of tools for learning about and debugging every aspect of your Stripe integration. We can resize this pane by clicking and dragging the handle, or click the full screen button to use the available space in the browser. Workbench will surface different details based on whether you're in live mode or test mode. If you click this toggle, it will show different API details for that environment. For example, we can see we're using these API keys in live mode, and which API versions were used for each request on this account. We can see a summary of recent API errors, and if we want to learn more, we can click on the Errors tab, and we can see the individual requests that led to those errors. The Inspector tab is really useful for learning more about your integration. It allows you to peek under the hood as you're browsing around the dashboard, or by entering an object ID. The inspector will show the underlying JSON for each object, and any related objects. We're going to try out the inspector in a moment. The Logs tab shows a history of API requests made to this account. For example, if we tick on the Get filter, we can see the exact API request for the error we saw earlier. The Events tab shows the history of events generated moment to moment on our Stripe account. We can see the details for each event, including Stripe's attempts to deliver them to any configured webhook endpoints. For example, here we're seeing that a delivery failed. We can resend that event, or click to learn more about exactly why it failed. The Webhooks tab lets us manage our webhook endpoints. For example, the URL that Stripe should use to send events to, and for which types of events. We can review recent activity, or create a new endpoint. The Event Deliveries tab shows Stripe's attempts to send events to that endpoint, which is useful when debugging delivery failures. The shell is an integrated command line environment, which lets you run lots of really useful commands against Stripe, but right from your browser. A lot of these are the same commands available from the Stripe CLI. For example, we can run the command Stripe customers list, and behind the scenes, it will call Stripe with an API request. And we can see that it's fetched the list of customers from our account. You can see the full list of commands available to you by typing Stripe help. One of my favorite commands that's really fun is the cd command. So I can just type cd customers to navigate to that page in the dashboard from the comfort of my shell. The API Explorer on the right allows me to visually build API requests. As I hover over each parameter, I can learn about its syntax and behavior and start forming my request. So for example, if I set the limit parameter to 5, we can see it's built the command in our shell. When I hit run, it only returns 5 objects in our list. At any point, I can minimize Workbench and continue browsing around the dashboard. Workbench will continue to serve as contextual help along the way. For example, when viewing this customer, the Inspect button highlights in the taskbar. Clicking on it reveals the underlying JSON, as well as request logs and events for that object. In the bottom right, you can see more notification widgets that show you when, for example, you have failed requests or recent activity on the account. And if you don't like dark mode, you can always flip over to light mode and match the style of the dashboard. From anywhere in Workbench, you can always click the Copy Link button to create a shareable URL that deep links to what you're seeing. For example, the logs view with a set of filters applied. You can then paste that link into Slack or share it with a coworker so you can do some pair programming or flag a specific error for your team. Click the Send Feedback button to share ideas right to our inbox. We're excited to hear where you think we should take Workbench next. When you need to hide Workbench completely, click the X button at the top right and it will collapse to the bottom right of the dashboard, where it will continue to provide critical alerts right from the icon. Next, we're going to hear how teams like Slack and Notion use Workbench to improve their productivity, and later on, we'll walk through a debugging session to see Workbench in practice.
Thanks, MG. Nate, we were chatting right before the start today of, you kind of own a lot of parts of the end-to-end experience for the billing experience within Notion. Could you share a little bit about your Stripe integration and how you've used Workbench so far and your first reactions to the product?
Yeah, so within Notion, you will go and upgrade through the app and we'll present you with a checkout modal. You'll fill out your information using Stripe elements and send it to our API, which will do all the other processing and create or update your subscription. As we've been maintaining this and also building it out, building new features, ways for people to pay us, we have been encountering more and more of the underlying complexity of payments and as manifested through Stripe. So we've needed to explore how do different changes, how do different requests, different options that we can use through the API, how do they show up in Stripe? What effects do they have? Do we, what things maybe aren't mentioned in the documentation that we need to know about? So what I'll do a lot of the time is I will set up how I think it should go, according to the guidance, and I'll then run through it and see in Stripe, open up the dashboard, open up the Workbench, look at what is the state of the object, the subscription or the customer or the invoice that I'm looking at, and what were the events that were fired, so that I can understand what happens when I'm doing this, and how does Stripe perceive it, and how does Stripe respond to it. The other thing I'll do with Workbench a lot is when I'm investigating, suppose finance flags, this invoice looks a little bit weird, can you take a look at it? What happened with this customer? They hit an error when they were trying to upgrade. I'll go in and use Workbench, again, using the events to see the sequence of things that happened, and I'll use the inspector to see, what is the current state of this that might be causing this issue. And that will really help me to narrow down, figure out what the bug is, and find a solution.
So when you're inspecting that state machine and trying to understand, like you created a subscription or an invoice and it's like moving through different states, what tools and resources do you find really helpful in like understanding like the behavior of that state machine?
I go to, in the inspector, each object has its own little events tab. I use that a lot, all the time. It will show me, not just, what were the updates, what were the events fired on this subscription, but what were the invoice events, what were the, what were related customer events. So it'll show me related things as well. And I find that really helpful to really build a picture of what happened and, what was the state when it happened, as opposed to when it is what it is now.
And if we could build anything to help you see that state machine better, what would it be? Like to really get that full view, like exploded of like, here's what's happening with the invoice, all the related objects, like what would really help?
Well, I think as it is, it provides a lot of that information, and it is all there for you. I think then part of the problem is that that's a lot of information. And these are big objects. Right. Subscriptions have a lot of fields. They can have many items, which have their own fields. And so I think the most useful thing for me would be a way to kind of focus my view. Suppose I only care about one or two attributes on that object. It would be really helpful to focus in on those, look at what the state is without having to scroll through everything else.
Like could be 100 plus fields sometimes.
It
in
could
the
be
subscription object.
Yeah, and it all comes, right now it all is expanded by default. And so if I'm looking for the status of the subscription, which all the fields are alphabetized, so it's at the bottom, it comes after items, which has its list of items, and each item has a price, and each price has a product. It's all expanded. So I have to scroll a lot, and sometimes I miss it. Right. So being able to narrow in, focus on that, and not just in the inspector, but in events too. I think it would be really helpful to have a diff view of events. The information's there. It has the state of the object after this event, and it's got a list of what changed. But it's hard to those are in a vertical format, and you have to kind of scroll back and forth to figure it out. So I think a diff view of what is changing in each of these events would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I imagine that you're frequently comparing different subscriptions or invoices rather, and like flipping through a few objects, right? And the inspector is like inspecting one object at a time. Like, how do you handle that? Like multi-object, like where you're just like investigating a lot of customer issues and trying to,
That's a great question. I do my best. A lot of times it means clicking to each object at a time, and sometimes I lose my place. The inspector doesn't have a back button. You've got your browser back button, but that sometimes takes you, it doesn't reflect the state in the inspector. And so I do my best to, kind of keep track of where I am, but it's a very manual, error-prone process.
Yeah, we've noticed some people opening Workbench in like multiple browser windows side by side, even because they're like using.
I'll do that, and then I lose track of my browser windows.
Exactly.
There's so many. The other thing that I do find really helpful is in the events, you can click to, what was the request that generated this. I think that's, that existed before Workbench, but to have it all in one pane, to have it just jump to a different tab so that you can see that is very helpful to see not only, what changed, but why did it change? What were the the requests that came in or the automated processes within Stripe that caused this change.
Cool. Thanks, Nate. That's really great to hear. Just like a lot of the areas that you've kind of seen and tested the product, primarily looking at the different objects and being able to more easily thread within Workbench itself than looking in the logs or inspecting responses more granularly and across many different API requests that could be much more challenging before. I want to have a follow-up for you, but I want to get to Burr. Burr, similar question, but as well, take it how you will. Could you share, how is your Stripe integration at Slack, and kind of where have you in your journey in the 3.5 years at Slack, ran into areas where you would like a product like Workbench to be able to more easily, help you test and implement and build out a better payments integration, and how has that, shown so far?
Yeah. So when I joined, it was something that I was craving, for lack of a better word, and
it's good to hear.
Then I met Mike at some point, and he was like, "Yeah, we're building something. I'll let you know later." And it happened. But we heavily use Stripe invoices to handle our own ecosystem. We don't use subscriptions, but we would love to. There are a lot of things that we do in-house because of our own credit policy that we handle at Slack. So because of that, we rely on a lot of in-house tools, and there's some, I don't want to say data duplication, but there's a lot of data duplication between what we have and what we record, within Stripe. So we essentially, we have two main cases for Workbench right now. One is it really helps us build new things. So a good example of that, we're introducing a new payment method, and that payment method requires a different, a paradigm shift, like using Stripe events, for some cases, more asynchronous than just cards, which are usually synchronous, with some exceptions. But that leads us to, okay, how do we handle these? Now we need to know when this event, happens, did it happen? Did we process it? Okay, yeah, we processed it, but how, what happened after? Did we get a different event? Things can come out of order. So we need to make sure that we can see all that, So that has been a pain point in the past. With Workbench, essentially, we love the inspector. We can see, again, same thing. We go to the inspector, we're looking at an invoice, we can see all the main, let's say, objects that interact with that, like the first-class citizens. There are more objects within. But we look at them, and we can go to invoice, payment intent, charge, and take a look at how things change, how the status progressed, for that charge. And take a peek at events, webhooks. We have kind of the same use cases there, even for building. And the second use case is essentially debugging. We have a big CE team that will let us know, for example, a customer is having trouble, and it's an outlier, and it reaches a point where CE, customer experience, can do more. And so they ask us, and we go debug, and we go directly to Workbench, this is the invoice. We go directly, look at the state of things, and usually it's pretty straightforward, to get to the root of the issue. Sometimes it's something super simple. Others it's oh yeah, this customer is not on session, so this is we can interact with the tool and say, okay, this is a subscription that we're processing, and the customer needs to be on session. So we have different processing requirements, or we can change processing requirements, and they're able to process their invoice correctly, for example, or their charge, or it can settle. So it's a mix of those two things mainly.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I want to get to where you also think the product can go, what you also want to see. But I think what would be helpful for the audience is maybe to dive into the product, show some of these really cool features you're showing, and let's come back and hear your thoughts on that. But I think for folks in the viewing room or watching this stream is let's see this. MG, do you want to take us through some of these pieces, the inspector, be able to debug, and show us a little bit of these functionalities and features?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah.
So we have an example business that we've built, which is Typographic. It's a web font hosting service. It's your typical SaaS. If we look at the pricing page, we have 3 monthly plans. We have a metered billing plan. So this is a fairly complex configuration for billing, where we're both doing monthly billing and also metered billing with the usage records. And if we jump over to our dashboard with Workbench, we can see a bunch of subscriptions from users. And let's take a look as an example here. We'll pick one customer. So we'll take this user's subscription, Ruth. And if we open up the Workbench, we can actually click on. Here we go. We can click on the inspect button to see the subscription for Ruth. Immediately pops up, and we can see it's not just her subscription, but it's also the related customer, the invoice, the subscription item, and we can look at the individual events associated with those objects as well. So we can dig into any requests made to those objects, any events, when they happened, any failed deliveries. And if we take an example of this a particular subscription, let's say that we wanted to understand all of the customers subscribed to a particular plan and be able to pull that up with one command. So we can go ahead and pick the price. We're going to see the JSON here for price.created. Going to copy it. We're going to copy it. We're going to go over to the shell, which is our handy built-in command line environment. So now we can go ahead and pick subscriptions. And we can go ahead and list those subscriptions. And we can see that we see all the available commands or all the available parameters here. We have documentation that pops up in line. We're going to go ahead and say which price represents our subscription plan, and then we can see that it's building the command on the left as we're filling in different fields on the right. We can limit it to just 5 as an example. And then we can also print the SDK request, and it will actually show us the exact code we need to generate this command if you're going to go ahead and copy paste this into your editor. When we hit run, it'll go ahead and actually run the command, and then we can go ahead and expand the objects in line and start to actually dig into a couple customers subscribed to this particular subscription. If I go over to logs, we can basically get the exact same view, but we can also add a whole bunch of other parameters. For example, we can say only show me the API endpoints, any requests related to the API endpoints for /v1/customers. And then we can also add a date of in the last 12 hours. And we can start to actually debug any questions from our customer-facing teams around customer objects that were created recently, and go ahead and see, for example, maybe a bunch of customers are created, but it turns out that our webhook events were failing. Why were they failing? Go ahead and click into those deliveries, and even resend those events when we're ready. Cool.
Thanks, MG. So everyone, you just saw MG give an overview and a more deep look into the actual product experience, things that both Nate and Bear were mentioning that they use now in their day-to-day developer experience. So coming back to you, Bear, after seeing the product demoed for the audience and as you describing your experience as well, what's the one thing, the single most desirable thing you would like to see the product go next into the next phase?
That's a tough one. Perhaps something that has to do with collaboration. Yeah, I mentioned to Mike before. I would love to see these embedded into Slack admin, right? So I would like to be able to debug from our invoice view of whatever we have nowadays. So that would be cool. That'd be awesome, right? Or being able to get or use different components of Workbench, not the entire view. I only care about, I don't know, inspector, right? So I can embed inspector view somewhere, and I don't have to go to the Stripe dashboard, look at this invoice. Therefore, I can have as many tabs open as and I'm not juggling. Oh, this tab corresponds to this invoice, which is the problem he was mentioning before.
The diffing ability, yeah.
Yeah, that would be a cool one, and yeah. Collaboration mainly. I'm looking at this view that we have talked about this before. I'm looking at this view and I want my dev partner
right.
to look at the exact same things I'm looking right now, deep linked, even that specific subscription object, that's, inside this other object.
Right.
I want them to see exactly what I'm seeing so I can collaborate easier. And we are, let's say we're finding a bug or debugging something.
How can you work together to identify how to move forward? So collaboration and diffing is a theme I'm hearing. NG, for the audience, would you like to summarize the scope of kind of main powerful features of Workbench that we're launching today? And then as well, while we have you here and we have great folks in the room who've given us a lot of feedback already, where would you like to see this product? Where are we planning to take the product to the next level to share with the audience and just kind of give them a picture of where we've been going further from today's launch?
Yeah, so the initial scope of like we're launching today is, you get this ability to see that full view of your integration. You get the ability to summarize errors, dig into like why they occurred, giving you guidance on how to resolve those errors, have the inspector be able to dig into all the related logs and events, be able to have that integrated command line environment. And we're seeing people do some really fun things with that integrated shell where they're like wanting more powerful scripting abilities. I think one really fun feature request I had was like, can you put the command line tool JQ like right into that shell where like people are running bash commands, like they're expecting it's a full command line environment. And we're like, okay, that's interesting. Like one cool thing you can do, for example, is CD around the website by just typing in like CD customers and it'll go to the customers page. And you can start to like treat it more like, like a command line environment. And so I think that's like just really fun. Like there's a lot of really cool things to do there. As well as composing full API request flows within that frame. So like the API Explorer lets you actually build out an individual command. But oftentimes like you have a full lifecycle you want to actually understand, including the events that occurred. And like how can we actually let you build and then debug and see that all play out. I want to also just respond to what you mentioned. I think it's really, so portability, right now Workbench is in the dashboard. And we're really excited to bring it to more surfaces. We built it in a way where it's super portable. We can unplug it from the dashboard and plug it into other places you're using Stripe. We even have like ideas on how you use it on your desktop or like VS Code and trying to see like how can we fuse the experiences such that you don't think much. Workbench is just available. I think like even bringing it to like your own admin app is a really interesting idea. It's like how can we extract components of Workbench in a way where it's a toolkit that you can just plug into your workflow. And I think specifically that like teams operate in a really interesting way. Like how we build software is actually the challenge more than like as a team is often harder than the actual like writing of the code. And it's like how do you solve problems? How do you get from the customer support issue to resolution? How do you actually do testing in a really safe way? How do you like understand, am I done building the Stripe integration? And how do I like debug and pair program with someone? To your point, Burr. And I think the collaboration side of it is really interesting where I think now we've actually, as of last week, added really useful deep linking. So you hit that share link button and you're going to get the exact view that you're looking at for that invoice item or subscription. But taking it even further and thinking like, can we add, for example, maybe saved filter views where your whole team has a list of frequently used filter views that you can consult, or even like identifying an error. And one thing we're thinking through is like, can you have a team member claim the error and say, so-and-so is working on this, and actually having a deeper integration with the other tools you're using, which I'm curious actually to ask you both just what tools you're using in your team's debugging lifecycle, like what's in the stack, like what is in your like sort of immediate toolkit? I don't know, Bear, do you want to start?
I mean, we use Slack, right?
Of course.
So
Not surprised.
I would say everything we can do here, we do it Slack.
Yes,
so,
like a Slack integration for,
or integration or just a thread. So you create a thread and like everything happens there. Everything that can happen here happens there.
Right.
So let's say you're building something with your team, or like you're talking about like this specific invoice, to say something, and you found the issue. So if you found the issue, how do you tell the other developer, like the other the other members of your team, that this is the issue and like they shouldn't be looking at this anymore? You can't, right? So what do? You create a thread, like in Slack. You post a link, this is the link we're talking about, and you explicitly say, okay, this is the issue. This is how we're not gonna interact with this invoice anymore because the resolution is this or that, right? And then you might have, I don't know, if you are using Zendesk, you are linking all those, you have everything there, like all the collaboration happens there. But I wish it could happen, where it actually should happen, like the source of truth, which is Stripe, and happens there, and then you can just link that information and you will get to the nodes and everybody's happy. And even people that don't need to, be in that thread, maybe, folks that are dealing with revenue recognition, they found, oh yeah, this person was added a credit note here because, reasons, and they exactly know the reasons. Like they can take a look at that, right? So that's an interesting case.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, we obviously use Notion a lot. And so we will usually put documentation about the investigation, or whether it's a bug or it's a new feature. We'll put it into our Notion doc, where we're tracking that, and different people can see it in, like you said, it could be CX is looking at it, could be finance is looking at it for RevRec or something like that. I think a thing that would be really helpful there is to not just have it embedded and blast the JSON at the CX people and the finance people, but have it in a way that can be more comprehensible for people who live in those different worlds.
For folks, we're nearing our end of our time, so just wanted to summarize some of the things we talked about today. We are launching and have launched the public beta for Workbench, so hopefully everybody had a really good opportunity today to learn about the product from MG, hear about the stories from actual users and for people who have seen this make a change in their developer experience. And then we've closed as well on our just general thoughts on developer experience, and we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Please engage with us here on our platform or in the different mediums that you can chat with us. MG, how can folks use the product? I think we can close there. And any thoughts you want to share with the audience before we close out?
Yeah, so you can get started today by going to dashboard.stripe.com/workbench. Reach out to us on Twitter @StripeDev. And yeah, I really loved hearing how you two thought about developer experience. Like for me, like I've been working on developer tools for over 15 years now, and there's a reason, right? It's that developers are fundamentally creatives, and like the tools that they use like defines the limits of what they think they can build, right? So we often think about developer experiences like, it's in Stripe's ethos, like we've been thinking about developers since our inception, and there's like, there's this moment where you're onboarding to something, and then from there on, you're in this like loop where you're like learning a new feature, you're like actually integrating and building with it, then you're going live, you're making that explicit decision, we're ready to go live, and then we're like debugging, solving problems, and then like you're ready for the next thing. It's like this like loop, and it can happen not just once, it happens like almost in like a parallel fractal fashion where, you're like, I'm going to integrate Stripe Terminal, or I'm going to integrate on-reader tipping, a particular feature. And you're always in that cycle. And our goal is to like build tools to shorten that experience, to help you get through that journey faster, have more confidence when you're ready to go live. And the faster you think you can get through it because you have a better tool, the more you can build. The more you can build, the more your team can build together. And so developer experience really matters to us, right? Like that, it defines the limits of what we think we can build, and we're excited to bring not just Workbench. We have a lot of other plans for an exciting set of developer tools coming down the pipe, and Workbench is going to continue to add tools into it over the coming year. So please let us know as you get started with the beta. There's an easy way to send feedback right through the tool. You click send feedback, it's going to get right to us. You might even get a personal email from me, and just thanking you for the idea, and like we'll make sure to build out our roadmap based upon your thoughts and feedback. I'm really excited to start building this with you all, and thank you both really so much for your time today.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Baird. Thank you, MG. So hope everybody enjoyed the present today, and excited to chat with you on the internet. Bye, everyone.